this is a really honest conversation between Peter and myself. Of course, we're serving currently as presidents of Roundnet Canada and USA Roundnet, but if you're from another country, you also can definitely get a lot out of our experiences and things that will relate back to what's going on in your country or in your local communities. And for everybody, I do say the word like a lot in the video. I'm gathering my thoughts. I'm moving really quickly with my words, but I also want you to like the video because when you do that, it shares the video with more people so we can get more people thinking hard about Roundnet and getting involved with Roundnet. And I think that's the big bottom line here is more people need to be involved in making Roundnet better. If we really want these goals to be achieved, we have these goals to become an Olympic sport, be legitimized, be professionalized, have everybody be paid athletes, paid, staff and everything in between. A lot of work needs to go into making that happen. And we talk about where some big gaps are right now. And we are pretty candid and I get pretty open with what some of our experiences have been. So enjoy them. If you get all the way to the deep end, definitely comment on what you think about that. And otherwise, thanks for tuning in. Really excited to sit down with my peer from north of the border, the other president of one of the two NGBs for USA and Canada, my good friend and rival on the cheering field, Peter Lamb. I'm very excited to have this chat with you. Usually these are more interviews. Hopefully this can be more of a conversation about sport development, Roundnet, especially national governing bodies and what we do in those roles. But yeah, what's on your mind?
Perfect. I'm really, really happy to be here and ready to rip off some band-aids in the sport of Roundnet.
Oh my gosh, me too. I'll start with like the big picture one first that we've been like brainstorming on how to frame this, but I think the biggest problem that I see like for everybody is the gap between wanting Roundnet to be somewhere, whether it's to be an Olympic sport, a professional sport, a sport that everybody has their local community that's vibrant and inclusive and all those wonderful things, and then the gap between that and like the energy that people put into the sport and how they actually show up for it. Specifically to national governing bodies, before we even get to what a national governing body is, I wanted to just get the lay of the land. What does it look like to be a volunteer for Roundnet Canada? And again, I'll emphasize, just like I am in the US, it's volunteer, it's unpaid, it's thankless hours. What does it look like as the president there?
So we have provincial bodies across the country. 4 or 5, I would say, are pretty active. Some aren't as active, but to be a volunteer is like someone who is hosting events, hosting tournaments, hosting pickups even. But with these the provincial bodies, they have like local organizations with like PDs and even someone who's simple or something so simple as like running pickup. So like, I guess the main thing is like being a volunteer is just like someone who does anything. And the thing is we don't have that many people who are doing that for our sport to like continue to grow.
Yeah, I agree. I think like sometimes you can think of it as like being a volunteer in like a formal role where you have like a specific designation, like that simple one of like, I just make sure there's pickup every Wednesday at my park in my city, in my province, or in my state in the US. Like that could be like a volunteer role. It also could just be like part of your own personal like training development as a player, where it's like, hey, I want to get better as a player and I want to build up players around me so they can build me back up. So it might not be viewed as like a volunteer activity, but like in a lot of ways, maybe it's just that we're hobbyists, but as far as like the NGB side of things, maybe like more at the national level, what is the makeup of like Roundnet Canada right now? There's like a board of directors. What else is going on there?
Right. So each year we kind of elect like different people from across the country, like different regions. So we have our Atlantic region, our Ontario, which is like a central region, and the West Coast. And we pretty much are asking for people that are part of the provincial board just so we can connect the country at like the level where we can run like a Canadian series. So that's like what it looks like at the national level to be, a part of the volunteer team, which is the board.
Gotcha. So is that with 3 total people on the board, if I have the math right, or is it more?
Currently, yes. Currently we have Quebec, Ontario, and West Coast as our main bodies because that's where majority of the population of players is coming from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like, what kind of work is that group like focused on working on? You mentioned a bit of like the Canadian series and connecting the provinces. Like, what other goals or things are you guys like focused on?
Right. So I guess the big picture for being an NGB is like people think that it's about like Team Canada and like choosing the team for Worlds or like getting series national championships like organized. that's just a small part of what we are. And people don't think that, or people don't know that. So this is why we're here to educate
I'm
people.
glad to dispel
And
it. Yeah.
yeah, we want to educate people that like that's probably a quarter of what we want to do. But unfortunately, that is kind of like the driving force of like what people think we do like 100% of the time. But ideally, that's like a quarter where we pick our team for Worlds or any other international competition, um, along with running like one crazy, fun, big, professional national championships. But then the other 75% is coming as an NGB. We're trying to push this sport forward. And what does that look like? Is like, and why do we do it? Is because we need to become a real sport that is recognized by the government here in Canada. And in order for that, we just need our numbers to go up. So that's another thing with people not understanding why we need membership. And I'm sure that's like very similar in the US. But like
Mm.
membership needs to be way, way, way higher. Like we're talking like ideally like 20 times higher from what we currently have, because without those numbers, like the funding and to become a national sport isn't going to happen. And
Mm.
like, we're not close yet. And people just don't know that. People think we're right there at the doorstep, but we're not even close. Like, we need way more members to get like, even for Worlds, just for example, like I was trying to get funded with like gear for the players. And then these top brands in Canada were like, oh, cool. How many members do you have? Like, how many people play this sport? And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, competitively, we have like 500. And they're like, oh, and they're like, we sponsor like sports like volleyball because they have 20,000 members in just Ontario, and they
Yeah.
sponsored the Ontario organization. And I'm like, oh,
Mm.
like we're not even close. So
We'll,
like,
we'll we'll
luckily
come back to you.
they
We'll come
still,
back to
yeah,
you. Yeah.
luckily they still gave us shorts, but so shout out to Overkill Canada for giving us shorts, but they're like not giving us more than that because they're like, oh, you're not there yet, you
Mhm.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll come back to that in a second. Just I'll reiterate from like the US side of things. I think it's a very similar thing where people like obsess over worlds and like Team USA and like even like being a national champion. Like those are like the flashy things. And I would say that's probably even like less than 25% of like the work that is done and that like ideally would be done for growing the sport in the US. Because like for me and I think for you too, thinking about growing the sport nationally, it's like, oh, the national governing body cares about everybody that cares about Roundnet. It's not just about people that are really good. The goal for like a national governing body is to make the sport something that is like part of the fabric of like this is just like any other sport, that it's built up to a point where this sport is played at all levels, at all ages, and is like a fun thing that people want to keep doing. I'll put to the side obviously like the IRF and like other countries are working on these experimentations to make the game more accessible, more fun for the viewer. But like even aside from that, even if the game was solved, the work of building these communities, this infrastructure, so that the sport can actually be like managed and maintained, um, leaves a lot to be desired. And as you mentioned around like, oh, these numbers aren't even close right now. For me, what's frustrating isn't necessarily that the numbers aren't there. It's I think the gap between people thinking that we're there and having like no context for
Right.
like what the goals actually are. And I think like on that example of a sponsorship, it is really murky to say things like, guys, like we'll get all this money into the sport if we just come together and like grow this thing legitimately and build up these organizations. Because that's not sexy. Like what's sexy is like, guys, we're going to professionalize the sport tomorrow. We're going to be in the Olympics by the time we get to like Los Angeles in 4 years or 3 years now. And I think what's really frustrating is this work doesn't happen overnight, but it happens a lot faster with a couple more people pitching in. And so I'd love to hear like what maybe some struggles have been and maybe some like issues have been with how many people are working on like Roundnet Canada things. You mentioned that like Worlds is all you're really able to focus on. Is that just based on like lack of people hours and like people to contribute? Like what are the gaps right now?
Right. Yeah. So very good question. Is the gap is numbers in people who are self motivated. It's like I feel like in our sport right now, the community is huge, or the community is like we have a strong community. Like we have people who are very,
Mm-hmm.
very passionate about the sport, but they don't know what they need to do or they don't know how to start. And most of the time for us, at least, is like a motivating factor to volunteer to do stuff is World. Like that's why like when Worlds comes around, like we do have some people coming in to do stuff, but it's like from the community standpoint and from growing our foundation, we don't have as much motivation. It's like self-motivated
Yeah.
anyways.
And something I want to like focus on in particular before going like onto other topics more broadly is like we both discussed, okay, like if we had more members in these NGBs, we can, maybe attract more sponsorship. We can build like better systems for local communities to actually sustain themselves. And like that's where most people are going to be playing is not traveling, but locally. But like I'm an advocate for NGBs and like the collection of like how like they come together around the IRF to work towards the
Right.
Olympics. But I'm curious, like for your experience, like why are NGBs? Why do we have them?
Oh, well, yeah. For one, I feel like, especially with such a large country, if we didn't have a connecting point, it becomes very difficult to push our sport forward at the national level. Sure, we can have people like playing pickup or like growing the sport through schools and like having high school students or high school tournaments or like having like the nets in elementary schools and kids get to like throw and catch and all that stuff. Like our sport's gonna forever grow, but for it to become like an official sport, that's where the NGB comes through. Like if we need an NGB to become an official sport, to get recognition, funding, sponsorship, all the good
Mhm.
stuff that will make us more legitimate and of course push us forward into the a step closer out of the 100 steps into the Olympics. It's like we need national governing bodies. And from a bigger standpoint, we need more national governing bodies, right? So it's like, um, sure, we have USAR and we have Roundnet Canada, and that's great. But like the bigger picture is like, do we have enough national governing bodies to even start the process to become an Olympic game? We don't. Like people don't know where we're
We're
at.
many countries short right now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I'll add a link below because I can't quote the total number of countries that we need to be playing in, but we are like I think several dozen short for how
Mhm.
many men play, and then I think women it's not quite as many countries that need to have like active participation. Um, we keep talking about all these like big picture things around like getting access and resources to the sport by legitimizing it. Can you specifically talk to if you know of the examples of like the pathway for Roundnet Canada in being like government recognized and getting like access to more resources and just legitimacy, like what that does in Canada specifically, if you're versed in it?
So I did have not looked fully in depth, mainly because we're not even knocking on step one. So I don't know the full process because step one they have told us, and we have gone through like research and like
Mm-hmm.
slowly packing in our resumes to become a recognized sport in Canada. And the first step are having like provincial organizations across the country. And then the second thing is to have enough members or having people who play competitively. So like Roundnet, we know like it's well known. Like most people, if you bring it up or you show them a video or something or a picture, they'll know what it is. Like the casual person on the street knows what it is, which is great, like for the game. But for us to become a recognized sport, like people need to play it competitively, right? It's not just saying like, oh, I know what it is, therefore it needs to be like a recognized sport. That's not a thing, right? We need to have people who actually go to tournaments and compete in it, right? So that's like just the first step, just to get enough members to prove that we are a growing competitive sport for it to be recognized. And then having provincial organizations across the country, which currently we have 4 that are active, and then we have 4 or 5 that are there but inactive, right? And then we have 10 provinces in our country, so we need to get them all done. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I know from my end, we had on our roadmap, and this is just under 5 years ago. We started US around it just over 4 years ago. Was see if we can get into being a provisional member or a new member of the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee. That's like when people think of the real Team USA, right? Like right now we're like Team USA in air quotes because we're not actually playing for the Olympics and we're not actually part of like the that's like a branded thing that like we can't just actually co-opt. Um, we had that on like our roadmap for 5 years,
Mhm.
and that's I don't think going to come anywhere near like what we achieve in 2025 because similar to like Roundnet Canada situation, there's these gaps with how many people are actually playing this sport and are playing it in a connected way. I think like when I talk about sanctioning play in the US, what's really confusing for anyone who's been playing around it for more than a couple of years is
Right.
the word sanctioned has like meant so many things, so many different people. and in a large part it's been made up, which is really, really frustrating. As someone who has
Yeah.
now like gone into the weeds under, so like what sanctioned and unsanctioned play is sanctioned pretty much literally means that the governing body has like approved it for being part of like its actual like sporting like governing body, and that it's actually being governed by whatever rules, regulations, has expectations on not just players but also organizers, and then generally on top of that there's like certain parameters of like safety and insurance to make sure athlete safety is prioritized in addition to competition and fun. And when I try to convey that idea that like having more sanctioned play is like one really important metric for growing the sport, a lot of people blink at me and say, yeah, like I'm just going to play over here. And I think a
Yes.
really tricky thing is that that's okay to not want to always have things be sanctioned, because I think like the bread and butter of Roundnet, what's awesome about it is that it spreads all over the world because it can be played so many places.
Right.
But like at the same time, this like next level step, that first step towards actually progressing it towards the Olympics, is saying, hey, we're going to like legitimize the sport in these small chunks by saying that these things will be sanctioned, these things will be following regulations, actually be held to a standard, as opposed to I think anybody that's listening to this can recall at least one, if not many, tournaments where and I might have been your TD for one, so if so, I apologize, where things were not really well organized because it was just a fun time and a good vibe, but not necessarily like a real like event experience. And again, that's that gap that I mentioned before of like wanting the sport to be at a certain place and then not actually reflecting and looking at what standard we're holding ourselves to. And I would very, very badly love for more people to actually push themselves towards those aspirations instead of just hoping that someone will drag them along and hard carry them. Like, we're not going to get backpacked by a couple volunteers to being an Olympic sport. Like, there's like a 0% chance that, I promise you. So if there's anything I can like really like press into anybody that's listening to this, is there's ways to get involved. And yeah, sometimes it's at the national level, but also there's ways at the regional, provincial, local level where like one very simple thing, if you want to rattle them off too, Peter, like you can just be someone who like makes Roundnet a really fun experience at pickup. Like you don't even need to plan the pickup. You can just be a good vibes person who like makes the thing other people want to keep doing. Because at the end of the day, like everyone that starts playing Roundnet, and people have different goals, but like everyone starts because they like it. But people stop because it's no longer a thing they like. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. Like nobody stops playing Roundnet because they're not making a ton of money on it. Like they stop because it's not fun. And I've seen that bear out when I see like B and C bracket players say like, I don't want to play my bracket games. And I'm like, oh, why not? They're like, because I can't win. And it's like, that sounds like you just don't like playing this thing. Like that fucking sucks, man. That sucks so hard.
Yeah, no, definitely. I love that point, because it's like if you want to just get involved and push us a little bit forward, it's like all it takes is you being kind to someone at a pickup, or maybe at a tournament, or maybe playing out your bracket game, or maybe in a pool play game. Like that one play could determine if they either stop playing or they keep going to more tournaments, right? And that helps us in the bigger grand scheme of things. It's like that helps us get more members, and more people playing is how we're gonna grow this thing, right? So it's like, yeah, just insane that like something so small can make such a big difference. And if people put themselves second, even for a second, it'll be a big difference.
I like that. Second for a second. We could make that like a whole volunteer like push.
I mean,
Yeah, that's a good one.
I actually have a story on why I'm even here in the first place.
Oh gosh, is it because I pestered you to have a conversation with me about the
why
dire
I'm
state
even,
of
like,
apathy
running.
and volunteering in Roundnet? Oh, it's not that? Oh, sorry.
No.
I'll cut this.
I have a story on why I'm even here talking about this as like Roundnet Canada like president. Because honest, first tournament ever, it could have turned me away. Like, so the story is, co-ed tournament on the beach, Wasaga Beach here in Ontario, and a pool play game. This was determining if we would make like top bracket, like top 16, or play in the bottom bracket. Like we needed to win that game, and it was Diane and I, me and my wife, playing in the co-ed tournament, and we were super new. Like we had no idea what was going on. Emerson was there; he like crushed us. And then we were facing this guy named Grady and his sister, and it was a tight game, mainly because we're like diving all over the place, like giving up our bodies. And then it was 2019, we were up. They were way better than us. Like he knew what he was doing, and we just gave it our all because we
Yeah.
wanted to make top bracket. And honestly, he could have just probably aced us out. But we noticed like he was like just putting it on all game to make sure like that we'll get rallies and that we'll play like an athletic, fun game, which is how Diane and I got hooked. Um, and it was 2019. I had the ball, and I didn't know what toe drag was, so I served, and I couldn't cut either. So I served, and then I like dragged my foot, so it like created this big angle, and then we won 21-19. We're like jumping up and down because we celebrating. We made top bracket, and then he's like, "Oh," and he kind of gave a weird look, and then he comes over to us, and he's like, "Hey, good game. You guys won already, but like, just so you know, like, you can't pull your foot over." I was like, "What? No, dude, let's replay it. Like, we're here to learn. Like, I had no idea that was a rule." And he's like, "No, no, no, you guys win." Honestly, that moment, I was like, "Wow, this sport is different." Like, he's literally a lower seed because he let us win that game, and we got to make top bracket. Like, if he like maybe call balled us, or maybe if he served us out, I don't know. Maybe I wouldn't be. You know what I mean? So it's like what I'm getting at is like someone like that, like building up like some trust for us as new players, and we're like understanding that the community is this tight and like this kind in growing a sport. Kind of put us here because
I love that
maybe
story.
we wouldn't come back. Like, yeah, no, right? If he aced us out, I don't know. Maybe I was like, oh, this sport's dumb. I'm out. So
Yeah,
it's like,
and like in that moment, and even that whole game, right? Like that player's perspective is not like their goal is not I want to win this game at all costs. I'm going to ace you. I'm going to do this and that. Like their perspective is like I want to have a fun time.
yeah,
And I think what like Round has really unfortunately gotten away from, um, in a lot of places, and usually this happens with someone who like is playing for a long time, is it becomes less about the love of the sport and love of the game, and it comes so much more about like what am I personally working on, what are my personal goals, and even down to like you know the player that like plays a pickup game to win all their games and not to like develop
right,
their skills and not to maybe like build up other people's skills. So I think like the takeaway for me on that is like just take a moment and ask yourself like why are you doing what you're doing? Because in that moment that player was like I'm here to have a fun time and like also make sure other people like have a good time. And like in that effect, Roundnet is not zero sum. Like a game in a sport, like yeah, someone wins and loses, but like
right,
that the energy and the vibe that could have come out of that game could have been so much worse.
exactly,
If it were not for like that mindset coming into it.
yeah,
And I think a lot of people, maybe people, I'm gonna give people credit. I think most people don't think about what their goals are and why they're doing what they're doing. When it comes to most things in life, and especially like Roundnet, where you just want to blow off some steam and run around and hit a yellow ball, like that's fine, or a white or whatever color ball you want to play with, it's fine by me. Um, but yeah, if we ask ourselves that question and we only find out the answer is I just want to win and I just want to build myself up, like we're not going to get very far as a sport community if like that's the answer that keeps coming up. So
yeah,
um,
yeah, no,
definitely
definitely
think on
not.
that one.
Yeah.
What other band-aids can we rip off? Any other old wounds?
Um, there are a lot, but you can decide which one we next.
Oh no, I'm going to popcorn to you. You got to pick something to go for. Where are we going next? What's on
Maybe
your mind?
effort here. Let's talk about
Effort?
effort. Yeah.
Okay. In what way? I've got thoughts.
How much effort there is, kind of in relations to what we were talking about. Like, how much effort do you give as a player who is passionate and wants this sport to be pushed forward? How much
Yeah,
effort do you give to do that? Right.
sure.
Yeah.
So, like for me as a background, like, and this is like a thing in psychology, and like I have a degree in economics, and my favorite class is probably like behavioral economics, where all these studies and these like scientists and economics like folks were like, hey, if we run these tests and like people do certain things, like we can pretty much prove that people act against their own self-interest. And in a lot of ways, like a lot of things are engineered in society. Like I think everybody that is watching this is maybe you're watching this on your phone, right? Like you probably spend more time on your phone than you would like to in a perfect world, and that's because the phones were made by people to keep you on your phones and not to like make you live the most fulfilled life you have. And so to me, I think the question is like maybe sometimes people do want the sport to be better and they have that intention for it, but that's not being met by like the actual effort that they're putting into making the sport better. And the point I want to make here is I think that people like act against their own self-interest all the time in life, and in Roundnet, it definitely shows up in the way that people do things that make the sport around them worse. A really simple example of this is people stealing balls from tournament directors. Like, I don't know how many balls you lost at the Toronto, Spikeball Tour event last year. Do you have that number? Do you have the number? Okay, I'm gonna assume it is in the multiple hundreds of dollars worth of spike balls that was taken. You can correct me if I'm wrong. And like, the reason that's interesting to me as like a player is the player that says like, oh, I'm really appreciative, and I'll also like vouch that also has happened to me multiple times where it's like, oh, I ran this event, I put on this thing, and people tell me that, like, to my face, hey, like, I really appreciate the work you did, all this and that. But the message that I'm receiving is, hey, like, if you want to run a tournament, it's going to cost you a couple $100s worth of equipment to replace, let alone like provide, source, and all these things. Like I'm getting fined for like doing a nice thing. And so what that tells me as a tournament director, and what this has probably told lots of people that are maybe not just running tournaments, maybe doing other things. Maybe they're running pickups for people. Maybe they're running socials with their Roundnet communities. All these things is they're being told, hey, don't do that. Don't do that, because if you do that, people will take things from you. They will not give back to you. They will not actually appreciate you. And what's confusing at the same time is when someone says, hey, like, I'm actually going to step away from, leading community in a small way at my local city, whatever it is. And then people turn around and say, well, why would you stop doing that? And the answer is like plain as day. It's because all of the signals have told them to stop doing that. And for my experience on it personally, like the things that I do as a giver, as it were, are pretty much built out of like my curiosity for trying things and like getting experience, like doing what I think are like cool things, trying like weird format structures, weird tournament formats, and all these rule testing stuff. And I think it's really fun. But I'm not doing it because I make money. If I wanted to make money, and that's a different conversation about like whether people should be getting paid to work hard on Roundnet, I think it's a valuable one. I would just do anything else. And so when it comes to like putting in effort, like right now, I think we're putting in so much effort into people not doing this stuff and to doing less of like the things that are good. So much so that I think it's actually being discouraged. Another example, we're recording this after the International Roundnet Federation dropped the first like wave of test rule set stuff. And yes, like some people are appreciative. Some people are like, hey, let's have them open mind. Some people are like, let's test these things. But the fact that there's even an ounce, and I'm not saying I'm opposed to criticism. I'm actually very interested in criticism. I love critiquing things all the time. If you haven't watched the videos before, what are you doing? I critique everything. I'm very critical of stuff. But the tone that people set around that is, and I know you're also volunteering on the RRR as I am, is so negative. And it's basically saying, hey, like, instead of thanking you for working hard on this and like putting together this report on what we're going to test and like analyzing the entire, hundreds of community input, suggestions, I'm going to just shit on it and complain and take away from this work and make you feel as bad as possible about working hard to help me. Like, you're trying to help me and I'm going to make you feel worse about it and I'm going to critique it. But yeah, what do you have to say about effort being put in and the gap between what people want and what people are giving?
No, that's the perfect example. Like, I don't know. Well, people don't know. I know people don't know, but like the IRF RR25 it's a group of people who are volunteering from across the world.
So they're not going to get paid millions of dollars?
No, not. I don't think we even make a dime actually.
Okay,
but
bummer. Well, I appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like it's so hard because everyone is in different time zones. So it's like already a difficult task. Like, I know people have short attention span nowadays, but like, it's already a task for us just to find a meeting time. And then we met twice a week for the past month prior to
twice a week?
Yeah, prior to even having that.
So impressive. Okay.
That
rule the rules packages.
Yeah. So then we take this long, twice a week for like an hour and a half to 2 hours each time. And this is like in the middle of the day. Like for me, I'm like doing it during my school, because I'm a teacher, like my prep period and lunch. Yeah. Like if we back to back, I'm like, great, I'm in. And then I don't even eat. Like I just go for it. 2 hours straight. We go for these meetings. And then after we finally come, I guess since we're ripping Band-Aids, I'm just going to tell people.
Yeah,
but
please.
We had so many people, like, I mean, not so many, but we had so many suggestions of rules, not people. So many suggestions. So we had this ginormous list of rules that people want to try to implement, and we're going over all of them. Like the IRF I commend them for even taking in all these ideas, because we had to go through them all. So it's like we have all these things.
They could have just said like, we'll just make up some ideas, but like I think hundreds of ideas were thrown out, right? If not more.
So we had so many ideas. We just go through them all. we had to word them properly and all this stuff. And then the packages came out. We had people to approve them. We had to go to each national governing body to approve them. And it's like all this work, all this time. It's like we're talking about like hours and hours. Like
Yeah, I mean, this is
and
this is like months worth of work across like with the NGBs involved too. There's like dozens of volunteers, but then the NGBs are also volunteers,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So there's like dozens and maybe almost 100 people NGBs. Yeah, yeah,
you can't even think of it. And then it takes people literally a second to make a bad comment. Like, and then it's like these negative things, like they think they're like talking to like logos, you know, like they're not. They're talking to like volunteers, like human being volunteers. Like we are.
I try
like
so
people,
hard to get that across that I'm a real person.
like
Yeah,
people, like sure we're behind the logo when we're talking through our like our
yeah.
national governing body or maybe the IRF logo. Like these things are logos, but there are people, like real human beings who put in hours of time. And then people just shit on it. It's like they're too fast, you know?
It's like if you get paid to do a job and you don't do a good job, then like you get like a bad performance rating or whatever, and then maybe you have to like improve and like find improvement. Like if you get a bad grade in school, right? You're a teacher, and
Yeah.
like there's lots of people that can relate. Everyone can relate to being a student because we're all students at some point, hopefully. No, we're not many students around it, unfortunately. So lots to learn there. But like you try to get your score up or get your grade up and then like improve from there. But like, and it's not to absolve like mistakes of happening. Like I think when mistakes happen, it's good to say like, hey, like I think it's a mistake, we should fix this. But to put in context that these are volunteers, and not only that, but that anybody could have volunteered for this.
Yeah.
And to say like, I don't want to volunteer. I'd actually like to be a Monday morning quarterback. And I'd like to just give my takes on things and not actually not help, but I just want to commentate on like what I think is going on.
Right.
There's lots of good advice, and I've tried to take it to myself with Roundnet specifically, is like if someone's not in the arena, if you're not like actually like putting in your own like energy and time to like work on it, doesn't have to be exactly this IRF thing, but like if you're not in the arena of like working on making Roundnet better in some way, it's very hard to take your critique seriously, with the only caveat being like you also are allowed to help. Like this is very much like a team project. Like growing Roundnet is not like a one person like army doing it. It's not like it's not an exclusive group of people that are working on growing the sport together. Like the whole mission and point of bringing it back to like where the conversation started with like Roundnet Canada and USA Roundnet and the IRF for this rules example on like what to expect of people is like the whole point of why they are how they are is that they're like of by and for the community. That it is like if you care about Roundnet, like this is for everybody. Like I'm very excited for the day that I can say like, hey, I am going to cheer on USA Roundnet from the sidelines. Like if you guys need to ask me questions about like past stuff, like love that. But like I'm like USA Roundnet doesn't belong to me. Like I'm just one of a couple of people. There's a couple of dozen people now that put in their time. Obviously I'm like a vocal person and I try to like amplify like the work that's being done around USA Roundnet, but like it's everybody's. And if your national governing body isn't doing well, if the International Roundnet Federation isn't doing well or isn't doing something that you think it should be doing, it's also on you. It's a reflection on you and what the sport looks like. It's not a reflection on just the people that are doing the work. It's a reflection on every single one of us. And I think that lack of not only effort, but ownership and responsibility in Roundnet is what is really painful for me to see. Because at the end of the day, when I think about, yes, the really awesome communities that we have and like the fun that can be had with the sport, I also look at the flip side of it and think about how I don't think we're even trying to like grow the sport. And that kills me on the inside. It kills me because I'm trying so fucking hard. And like I like you and I, like we can want it as much as we want, but like 2 or 5 or 10 or even 100 people, a dozen people at the IRF that are volunteering, like they can't grow the sport alone. Like it's going to take so many more people. And so that's, if there's anything you take away from me on this conversation, like I hope you take that away.
Definitely.
I'm ripping off the band-aids. I'll drop obscenities. Like I have to. It'll get clicks. I think that's definitely going to be a short somewhere. We'll see.
Yeah, no, definitely. And like the door's always open. Like people are waiting for it to close, like some sort of announcement, and then they just want to kick the door down. But hey, the door is always open. Like it
is always open. Yeah, there's cycles to stuff. Yeah.
The door's open for your national governing body, for your local club. There's door. The IRF opened the door wide open. This is the biggest door ever. Like they're literally taking anybody to help. So it's like these doors are open, but it seems like people are just waiting for a moment where they think it's closed and they want to kick it down. But
Yeah. And on that front, like I'll say, like not only is like the doors always open, like there's never a bad time to get started, and there's never a bad time to start helping. Like if you want to take advantage of like the turn of a new year, like love that, like whatever momentum you want to capture. When it comes to like getting involved, I think the big thing that I've thought about looking back, is like there was actually a moment where I was like, I don't know if I want to volunteer on the USA Roundnet board, and the reason for me was because I was like, I don't know if I'm ready to do this. And the harsh reality with like where we are as a sport is like we're gonna kind of have to learn as we go.
Yeah.
Like you might feel like, oh, like I can't get involved. Like I'm just someone who loves Roundnet. And it's like, you know what? Like I pretty much was just a person who loved Roundnet also when I started volunteering for things. When I started running tournaments, when I started building clubs, when I started talking to other people about building tournament series, like I just loved Roundnet. That's all it took.
Yeah.
And I guess the other big ingredient, I talked to Frey about this, but like the one ingredient was loving Roundnet. The second ingredient was a little bit of commitment and follow through, like accountability to get shit done. As long as you have those two things and you can hold yourself to those standards, like you're not going to be ready, and at the same time you're always ready to get started. So don't feel like there's going to be some moment where it's like, hey, like we're looking for someone with exactly your profile of experience. Like there's plenty of opportunities to get involved, and yeah, the door's open, but also like there's no perfect time to be ready. I just wanted to really emphasize that in as many words as possible, apparently. Yeah.
Yeah, very true.
All right, what are the band-aids you have on your list to rip off? I think we got effort covered.
Yeah. But like in relation to like community growth and effort, it's like there's so many little things that people can do that you
want to like rapid fire them.
Yeah, like okay, well, like picking up a ball.
Like how people can help Roundnet.
Yeah, like picking up a ball, cleaning up after yourself, like your trash, like okay.
These are being like decent human being things, by the way. Like this isn't even specific to Roundnet.
Like those things are huge for TD, and people don't even understand, because after me running a 10-hour event and I planned it for like a month prior, the last thing I want to do is walk around the field and clean up trash. But I do it every time, so it's like those little things make a difference, and people don't really know that it makes a difference. And they say they want to help, and they're like, "Oh, what can I do to help?" I get so many, like, "What can I do?" But I don't want to be like someone boss, because I'm not paying you.
Right.
So it's like
I think
I want people just to be like self-motivated.
Ask yourself that question, you guys. Like it's not a crazy question to ask yourself. Like just think like if I wanted to help, which is a big if, what would I do to help? But you have to ask yourself that question.
Yeah.
Not that I'm not interested in like having that conversation with people, because I am, but I think like the other half of that question from my perspective is like, I know I don't have all the answers.
Right.
And I think I do a very good job of making sure people know that I don't think I do. But at the same time, I'm happy to share my experiences and what I know and what I've seen. But like, if you've got a fresh idea, like lots of people give me really good ideas all the time and feedback, and like that's my favorite thing. I think one of my favorite moments from the Christmas Classic was like I got a rules question from people, and like I won't go into the details, but like at the end I was like, thanks guys, that was fun. That was like a really weird scenario of like what happens when this happens, and I was like, I think you guys have the call, right? But like, good to know. Like I've never heard of that one. Just like a very specific bang bang play or whatever. And I think we need more of that, more curiosity.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good word for it. We need curiosity. And don't get me wrong, like I love when people offer their help, but it's like I don't want to be directing you to do stuff. You know, I want people to be able to like ask themselves.
I know. I can speak to this for a moment. Because for USA Roundnet, like there's a lot of appreciation for we just had like Ezra off board on the board of directors. Rojo was on the board last year, and we have like Ethan and Aiden, and then we're bringing on another person who will announce publicly hopefully soon. But like Rojo set up some like new strategy, and one big thing was around like having like more clear like ownership of things, not from like people already had their tasks defined, but like to your point, like I want to do stuff. Like I'm happy to like work with people and help people like grow and mentor them, but like I'm not just gonna be like a manager that's just like giving you out tasks and stuff. Like I want people to tell me what they want to do, and like what I always say for like, again, focusing maybe a little more on like the NGB side of things. When people are like, what if we did XYZ? I'm like, awesome. Like you want to do that and like just build it out for like the whole national community. And like usually people say one of the two, they say, oh, I'm interested in that. That sounds like a fun project to work on. And I'm like, awesome. Like, let me know what you need and like just go do whatever you want. Like Like use me for support, but like just it's your project. Go figure it out.
Yeah.
And if you want a team, like we'll go recruit teammates for you to go build this project out together so that it can be as big or and successful you want it to be. And then the other person usually says, "Oh, well, I don't know if I want to do like that." And I think it comes back to like that readiness of like feeling like me, like work on this whole thing. And it's like, like the sport's pretty small still. Like it needs a lot of people to work on like building out these structures and these systems. And so like you can do it. Like you can do that whether it's at the national governing body level, which again like needs so much infrastructure to funnel down and like connect more dots. You mentioned, I think, like as a highlight here, like the provincial bodies that are connected across Canada, like the US, there's more states, but like Roundnet isn't really being played in every state. And even if it is being played in those states, we're still like, I'm out here begging, like, please, let's connect. Let's not even like, there's not even like that much give and take, but more just like, let's just like connect under these goals of like advancing the sport together so that we can do all these fun things. And so we can get towards the Olympics, so we can get towards legitimizing the sport. And I get met with like shrugs and I'm like, oh, well, all right. Like just step one, guys, like you got to want it. You got to want it as much as I want it.
Definitely. And I know people do want it, you know.
No, I'm not denying people.
Yeah.
I think I want people to, I want as much as possible for everyone to like understand if the goals are what we think they are, if the goals are the Olympics, if the goals are like legitimizing the sport, like that, I don't know, like not saying take my word for it, but like at least like be willing to hear out like what I've experienced, what I've learned about the sport and what other people have learned about the sport across the world and, you know, across the country around how we actually should go about this. I know for me specifically, I'm like incredibly passionate about it being community driven, community led. We've had like a very interesting road as a community, as a sport, where really for like the first 5 to 10 years of the community development, like Spikeball was just owning the sport. And then what happened and why USA Roundnet even exists was in part because the International Roundnet Federation and the USA Roundnet was created with basically like a donation from Spikeball saying like, hey, we shouldn't be in charge of sport. You guys should be. And right now I'm looking around and people are like, yeah, we don't want to be in charge of sport. And I'm like, oh, but like people thought about this pretty hard and like they're right. And the reason they're right is because like the goal that everyone talks about is like the Olympics and all that. And that it's not like it's not privately owned as a sport. It's a publicly owned sport. And I'd be happy to talk about the public and private side of things. Yeah, anytime if anybody wants to discuss that with me.
I mean, that's a big band-aid.
You want to go into that? Go for it.
The Spikeball Band-Aid.
Okay.
Like Spikeball has done so much for this game for the past like 10 years with STS. And I think we all have relied on Spikeball. And now we have this opportunity with national governing bodies to take ownership of our own sport that we're passionate about. And they're still there. It's not like they're going away, but the fact that national governing bodies now have this opportunity to push it forward, like we need to take it, not just complain and scream and yell at Spikeball for anything they do wrong. That they think I want to
make a couple comparisons. Yeah, and I'd love to hear like more thoughts from you on this. But like a couple comparisons to make is for a couple of years, like in the early 2020s, like Spikeball had like sponsorship from like different companies come in where Spikeball was like, we're this big brand. They like built up their assets as a company to say, hey, come sponsor us. And like, you know, we'll make Instagram posts. We'll like have you on our ESPN broadcast as sponsors. And then the company's like, cool, like we'll sponsor that. That sounds good. And so Spikeball built up that asset, and that's how they got sponsorships. For the Roundnet community, for us to build up like these sponsorships, like you mentioned, like getting like equipment sponsorships or anything else, like the real world is we need to have like these assets that are, again, for me, like I think publicly owned because like Roundnet is like this shared asset. And then it can be used to, maybe it's to support Team Canada or Team USA to get them equipment or funding to go to world championships. But also like the funding, and again, the more important part of like growing the sport needs to be that if we have this base of membership, we can then support all these local and provincial and state leagues and communities that actually need to use the money at the grassroots level to then do more player outreach, do more player development, pay whoever might need to be paid, right? In this not perfect world, but more like forward thinking world where the sport has been built up and there is like this asset that is Roundnet itself, that Roundnet is worth something. Not that Spikeball, the company, is worth something, but Roundnet is worth something. And if Roundnet's going to be worth something, my take on that is the community should be getting the maximum possible benefits from it versus like anything else. And I'm curious if you have more thoughts on like that, because for me, like we mentioned like numbers of members that we have, and it's like, yeah, like it does cost money to be a member. Why? Because like the returns we get on that of building the sport is not that you're not going to make money. This is not like a like stock that like that you like just get like tons of money back from, but you are kind of investing in the sport as an experience and like a hobby that's going to give you a lot back, like, you know, intangibly as a sport that develops and grows. Whereas like before, Spikeball put money in, grew like their sport and like following, grew their like tournament series, and then got sponsorship based on that. So I think that's how I look at like building up these national governing bodies and making the value of them higher.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, we have this opportunity to grow Roundnet now. It's not like people are going to be, or companies are going to be sponsoring Spikeball the company or Spikeball the series. It's now like companies can sponsor our sport. Like it's completely a different game here.
Yeah, it's again. I always say it's like two sides of a coin. It's like, whoa, that's kind of daunting because that's like it's on us, but also like really exciting too. So like depending on how optimistic you want to feel, like you should lean into that and get excited about it.
And I think we need to accept as a community that it's not going to be this giant leap that we're going to take. We're going to have to take a couple steps back to take that leap, and that's what this season is going to be about.
Not even like the leap, but just like you mentioned, like steps of 100, right? Like there's way more steps than we might appreciate, and like there's so many sports that Roundnet could be compared to, and like the comparisons are sometimes valid and sometimes not valid. But like more importantly is like Roundnet will be its own sport, and the steps we go and the path we take like will be like however long and winding as we make it. But like so many sports that Roundnet is compared to are so much older, and maybe people like miss so many like inflection points that are in the sport. But like the big one that I like always try to tout around pickleball when people say like, oh, if we just had money, like we'd pop off as a sport, is that like money came into pickleball like in the last like 5 to 10 years really with like COVID. Right. And over 20 years ago, there were more people in the US like as sport ambassadors, like in their local community advocating for like court space and like all these like resources compared to the number of members that USA Roundnet Canada had in 2024. Right. So just like and like we talked about the number of people that are actually putting the effort out of the players that we actually have. So like imagine if every single person that you know that plays Roundnet that's competitive about it not only was doing that, but also was like advocating for the growth of the sport. And then fast forward like 5, 10, 20 years, like that's when the fruits of the labor come, as like one example. Again, there's plenty of other examples and no sport is the same. But I think like the big gap that I see is, and we see it with even local communities that are doing better or not as well, is the same function. You see how many people are putting in time to make this local community better. And if you're listening to this, I bet you know, and you could probably name, if you want, you can comment like which community leaders in which like cities and states and provinces are doing well. And the reason that you probably know they're doing well is because it's not just one person working on it. That's the bottom line. So don't take that away though. I want you to take away the thing I said earlier, but if there's a second or third thing you want to take away from this conversation, it's that like this is such a group project. You have no idea.
Yeah.
What else do we have to rip off, Peter? I love this. I think this is the most I've cursed in one of these conversations, and I love it. not that that's like that's actually usually not my vibe, but like I don't know. I'm trying to be as authentic as possible, and also like, you know, again, we talked about like you shouldn't just be like mean for the sake of being mean, but like I want people to know what it's like, how it really is.
No, this is the season for it because we're experimenting on rules, and it's almost like we need to be as open-minded, or if not more open-minded than when we first started this sport. Like when you first, like think about when you first joined, and you were open-minded. Like we all had to be open-minded to be here. Like there's no one who's just like, oh, cool, I have this backyard game, and then I play with my friends at the cottage or on the beach and with a beer in my hand, and now I'm gonna go and play against other people. Like I'm gonna travel for it. Like you have to be open-minded as an individual to even think of doing that, right? So this community is built off of open-minded people. It's just that we slowly closed our mind because we think or thought that this is some pro sport, right? So it's like, go back to where your mindset was when you first wanted to go to your first tournament. Be open-minded and take in every detail of this season and do everything you can, or it can be big, it can be small, but do something to help push our sport forward. If it's locally in your pickup, if it's being nice at a tournament, if it's joining your national governing body, if it's joining your provincial or state body, if it's volunteering for the IRF, like it can be big or small, as long as we're doing something and being open-minded about anything that's being pushed forward this season, then I think we'll take a couple baby steps forward toward that goal of ours.
Mic drop. Let's end it there. Thanks so much for listening to us, you guys. We'll see you in the next thing. What goals, what are some of the goals and I guess like priorities? We talked a lot about rule change. We talked a lot about community, like building a connection. Like how does the national series fit into that picture for Roundnet Canada this year? I can share some insight on the US as well if you'd like.
Right. Yeah. So Roundnet Canada, last year we ran like a Roundnet Canada series, but I'll be honest, like since we are ripping off Band-Aids, it was a fake series on us. Like it was all of our provincial bodies running their regular circuit, like the Atlantic Rim one, Ontario, Quebec, Alberta, BC. Like we ran our own provincial circuit, and then we kind of just, as Roundnet Canada, we pretended that they're all one series by saying like, oh, here, play in some of these events and you can cross over points or statuses and be ranked amongst each other. Like, but it was all fake. I'll be honest. And it was a Band-Aid. Like it was to cover up for what we were lacking. And this season we're not gonna do that again. We're gonna make this a real Canadian series where we have 3 levels of events running across Canada. There's going to be our series event, which is for the local community, aiming for growth, meaning aiming to fill all of our divisions as like women, recreational, youth, intermediate events, and our qualified elite division. So that's like being able to run multiple division in your local organization. And you shouldn't be focusing on getting traveling players at the series event. It's just mainly for that city or region. And then we have our majors, which would then be like 3 or 4 across Canada, where that's attracting traveling players. So it's like we're trying to create a series where we're not forcing players to go to 20 events per season. It's like you can just go to like 2 majors and still be able to qualify for something. So this is like our competitive level. So, and then we'll have our national championship as like our grand finale. So now it's becoming like a real series with 3 different levels of events, all 3 aiming for something different that will all push toward growing our organization and sport.
Awesome. I mean, I don't know if you like ripped that right off of the like national series that we're doing in the US on our webpage because it's been up since August, but we call them sectionals, regionals, and nationals, and that's exactly the same vibe. I think the balance of how I think about the national series in the US, and it sounds like for Canada too, is balancing like community building as one like focus, like competitive achievement for players that want to travel, but like making it accessible where it is not an expectation they travel so much. And at the same time, if they travel less, that opens them up to, I'll say first, not burnout, because it's a lot to do that much travel. And then secondly, and I think equally important to the burnout, is connect with their local communities. It's very hard to connect as a high level player with your local community and build up that community and train them, maybe coach them, however you want to engage as a player and high level player at that. If you're only traveling, it's very hard to spend time at home, growing the roots of the sport. And then I think the third like one in focus is like around just changing and advancing the sport is like we're testing these rules at like these majors events or these regional events in the US. When that like if you can put all those things together, a lot of good things come out of the national series. It's not just any one particular priority; it's kind of balancing all those priorities together. I will say, like, to give you credit and give the rest of the Roundnet Canada like crew and all the provincial folks like credit, like I wouldn't call the Canadian series like fake by any stretch from last year. I think like what's very confusing about like a sport like this is it's all made up, like it's all fake right now. And that's not to say that it's not fun and that it's not enjoyable. It's not like not worthwhile. Like it is all worthwhile and fun and enjoyable. But like at a certain point, like we're deciding what we want to pursue, what we want to set up as the incentives, what are the goals. And it sounds like you reflected on like having some slightly different and rebalanced goals between last year and this year. But like part of that in my mind is like also branding. Like whatever you want to make up as branding and marketing, like if you say this year it's like such a good Canadian Roundnet series, like I'm not saying I don't believe you, but I'm saying like that's great that like that's the message you're putting out. But like at the end of the day, like the rubber hits the road. Like players are gonna have a good time, and if players have a good time, and then more people play around it, like that's the actual like measure of success. It's not like whether there's some sort of mechanism that's particularly compelling, or if there's a really cool qualified division. Like all of that is made up. And the point of making those up isn't for the sake of making them up. It's making up those things so that you can balance the actual goals you have for growing the sport and giving people like room to pursue achievement and all those things. That's at least how
Right.
I think about it and how I hope people think about it. But again,
Right.
usually people aren't thinking about this stuff. They're usually just like, I hit ball hard.
Yeah. No, I do appreciate that. It's very, very true. We are like the pioneers of this sport, and I think people forget that because when things don't look the way they think it should look, like super professional, they think, oh, what are you doing, or why is this happening? Why is it not this way? But really, like, we are the pioneers of the sport, and we are making a lot of stuff up. But there's a lot of thought behind what we're making up. So, like any
it's
sport,
much more about
like,
the why. It's not. Yeah, it's much more about the why. Why are things how they are? And I think to really emphasize this, we talked about it before. If you're thinking to yourself like, why is it this way, or like, oh, I think it should be like that. Like, I love that people are like raising their hand and asking those questions. I want you to ask one more question, which is, can I help make it better? Like, that's the question that we're missing right now. Like, because so many people are capable of asking the why and how and like who questions of things, but like the last question needs to be like, can I help? Can I work on this? And no, you like probably won't get paid $1 million to do it because that is the state of our sport. But like that's where we all are right now. Like, we're all just getting experiences and like a good experience and fun time out of it. And that's like I hope you're still enjoying like what you're doing for Roundnet Canada. I know like the stress can like be really hard to balance it for me. Like, I definitely go through my bouts of just not even overwhelmed, but just like, wow, like this is a lot. Like, we've got a lot of stuff to do. I would really love some more help to do it, but at the end of the day, like I'm resigned to know that like I'm getting as much done as I can in my volunteer capacity, and like if we want more stuff done, like it's going to come from more people. It's not going to come from me or you. You're telling me you are not 50 people in private, which is a bummer, because if there are 50 people volunteering for Roundnet Canada, I think you guys would have a lot of kick-ass things coming together.
Yeah. There are a lot of roles and jobs that need to be filled, and
maybe just 25 volunteers, 25 for 2025. I think USA Roundnet has not quite 25 total volunteers, but we're probably around that number. I'd have to double check with our HR.
Who's a volunteer?
Yeah. I'm one of our lead recruiters at HR, so like I should know that number.
There you go.
Yeah. But yeah, thanks for talking through the national series. It's very funny. I think like in the US and Canada, both of them are sharing these goals, and I know having more like connected things in North America is another really valuable thing, because some players do want to travel. So trying to find the right ways to balance all those things together is like I'll tease like something we're thinking about, but like it's hard to answer those questions, and it takes time to figure out the answers. So if you wanna help us explore those questions, like you know where to find us.
There you go.
In these rooms right here.
Not in our head office.
Yeah. Sweet. Awesome. This is a good epilogue. Thanks so much, Peter. And we'll definitely I don't know, we'll see who's listening to this thing all the way through. You want to throw a comment for people to like drop if they listen this far, like a weird phrase. I think that's a good way to juice the engagement.
Drop a what? Sorry.
Drop a comment. What should people if people have listened this far in this conversation, what should they comment below?
Like a word.
Yeah, it could be random, like a random phrase, random word.
Okay, if you made it this far into this interview or podcast, I need you to drop one word that you think our sport needs.
Roundnet needs blank. Fill in the blank. Okay, you got your assignment, y'all. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this conversation. I hope you are thinking harder about Roundnet like we are, and we'll see you in the next thing. You can subscribe to this channel if you want to, put in that little bit of effort to make my work go a little bit farther, and I'll see y'all in the next thing. Thanks, Peter.
Beautiful. Thank you.